You may be seated. So the late comedian Mitch Hedberg once said, "I got a belt on that's holding up my pants, and my pants have belt loops that hold up my belt. I don't really know what's happening down there. Who's the real hero?" Now that's actually a really good question, is it not? It's a question that kind of blows my imagination wide open and makes me wonder about the world in a whole new way. Who is the real hero? Now, I heard this quote one Thursday afternoon while listening to a podcast that dedicated a full hour to the idea that a belt is really not a very good idea. And maybe I shouldn't tell you that. Or maybe I should at least say that Thursday is my day off, so your tithes were not funding this useless activity. But the episode was titled, "How Did the Belt Win?" But near the end, the hosts let on that for months the working title was, "Belts Are Stupid." Now, the change in title was a prudent one, wasn't it? Because most of us, if we are told that something we're wearing is stupid, will rear up in defense of our ascots or short shorts or patent leather sneakers or whatever's been maligned. Defensiveness is instinctive in the face of challenge. However, a question like, "So how did the belt win?" leaves a lot more room. So much so that some of us might be willing to let the case for suspenders be made for 60 straight minutes on a Thursday afternoon in September, or so I've been told. So we all know that there are moments, encounters, conversations that put us immediately on edge. Our reptilian brain kicks in to attack mode when someone says something unflattering about our mother or calls the gear we use to hold up our pants stupid, or you can fill in the blank with whatever ticks you right off. But what I wonder is whether it could be helpful to think of these annoyances, large ones and small ones, as obstructions. Obstructions to relationship. Obstructions to even seeing another person for who she is or who she might be. Stumbling blocks between us and the person who seems to be so against us right now. Jesus says a few things in our gospel reading that are familiar enough to us to have become cliches in the English language. Actually, it's not quite true about one of them. What Jesus says in Mark and also in Luke was, "Whoever is not against us is for us." You never hear anybody say that these days, do you? The cliche we hear is, "Whoever's not with us is against us." We like that one better. And Jesus actually did say something like it over in Matthew. But it was in a strange debate about whose power demons are cast out by. The ones who were against us may not have even been humans in that passage. But we'll leave it for another day. But it is very telling that we have so latched on so securely to the uncertain saying from Matthew and forgotten about the Mark. Whoever is not against us is for us. Another memorable line is the one about a millstone being hung around your neck. Although as a cliche, a millstone is a heavy burden that keeps us from doing what we should or want to do. That's not quite true to the original either. In the gospel, said millstone is actually what drags you down to the bottom of the sea in punishment for something bad that you've done. The passage goes on to mention severed hands and plucked out eyes, as well as the fires of hell where a worm never dies and you'll be forever thirsty. Colorful stuff. So colorful, in fact, that we've probably forgotten what the offense was that set Jesus off on this uncomfortable rant. The offense was putting a stumbling block in front of a little one. That's the other cliche. And stumbling block we get pretty much right. It's something that trips somebody up. So consider the two problems in human relationships Jesus warns us to avoid, and consider them together. First, whoever is not against us is for us. In other words, assume the best. This world is not mostly full of enemies unless we make it so in our imaginations. Second, don't put stumbling blocks in front of little ones. In other words, just stay out of the way. Let people move off in the direction they need to go. God may have a use for them over there even if you can't imagine anyone sane heading off in a direction like that one. As moral teachings go, these are actually pretty mild for Jesus. He's not saying to turn the other cheek after being slapped or to give away the rest of your clothing after the guy's taken your coat. Here, Jesus just says, don't be so suspicious and competitive about who does God's work in the world. And don't be the obstruction in somebody else's path. It is curious then that Jesus goes on with that strange rant about hell and cutting off body parts to keep from going there. So let's go ahead and take a diversion into hell, if you will. First, the Greek word for hell is Gehenna, and it was an actual place in that time. It was a garbage dump outside Jerusalem that just kind of smoldered all the time. It's a very vivid image of a bad place no one would ever want to go. Second, if you think the gospel is all about figuring out how not to go to hell, note that the people who go to Gehenna are those who set stumbling blocks in front of little ones. Here, at least, it has nothing to do with belief in Jesus, does it? Now, I believe the Christian good news is that the death and resurrection of Jesus, not our own good works, are what stand between God's judgment and our souls. That's the gospel, right? That we're saved by grace, not by what we do. I believe that. So why the fireworks and worms and nasty stuff? Well, when Jesus begins to describe this broken down, sinful world that God will redeem, maybe he thinks it really is broken down and sinful. And left to itself, maybe this is the kind of wrath that would make some sense if God were to simply call things as God sees them. Or maybe this is how destructive living as though whoever's not for us is against us really is. This is how destructive placing stumbling blocks in front of other people can really be. Everything can go up in flames when we live that way. So lose hands or eyes or feet, lose everything about you that allows you to do anything at all if the things you do are making enemies and tripping up other people. Wow. Is that a word for our time or what? You've heard the dismay often enough, but let's go ahead and put it in scriptural terms. Our politics are a near perfect denial of Jesus' teaching in Mark chapter 9. If you're not with us, you're against us, say both parties. And since you're an enemy, I'll place stumbling blocks in front of anything you do and say as a matter of principle, which it is, of course. But the principle is that Jesus was wrong. Whoever is not with us is against us. Those are the words we're living by today, and things are kind of going up in flames, are they not? So I wonder what it might mean to actually live as a community that takes Jesus' words seriously. How do we really live as though so much is at stake when our suspicions and with our suspicions and our obstructions? And here's what I think I need to do. I invite you to consider it as well. The change Jesus is calling us to first is a change of imagination. So what would it take for me to begin holding one particular person who I think is dead wrong on something? Gay rights, abortion, immigration, free markets, you name it. What would it take to begin holding that person in my imagination for a while as a friend and not as an enemy? Could I begin to make that people are for us the default position of my mind? Could I nudge the dial at least a little in that direction over time? I think I could if I say my prayers among people who really believe Jesus was on to something when he said how destructive a life given to suspicions and obstructions can be. I guess I could also begin trying to be a little more of a how did the belt win rather than a belts are stupid kind of guy. Sometimes just the way we frame things makes all the difference. Speaking without judgment is about a whole lot more than good manners. Leaving off judgment is often how we make space for the person in front of us to actually respond to us. Conversation, empathy, forgiveness, maybe even friendship with the most unlikely other really can grow up in no more space than that. And maybe there are fiery forms of hell we will only get out of as our imaginations are changed and healed by the gospel of Jesus. For how much refreshment might it bring a weary, suspicious soul to imagine that those we once thought of as enemies might just be for us after all. Amen.